Aster Gate Command Academy hung above the red world of Orinox like a steel ring over a sea of dust. From orbit, the planet looked calm. Inside the Academy's central tactical sector, nothing felt calm at all. It was final examination day for the command track. Every cadet knew what that meant. Pass, and the fleet might trust you with a real bridge one day. Fail, and your future narrowed before it had truly begun. Kael Varen stood with his squad in Launch Chamber 3 while the lights shifted from white to combat amber. He was a human senior cadet in tactical command, and his exam brief looked simple on paper. Lead the squad, secure the objective, keep everyone alive, and hold command until extraction. Above the chamber, behind a glass observation wall, the training council and exam supervisors watched from their raised deck. Down on the floor stood the cadets whose futures were being measured. Up above stood the people who believed they had the right to decide whose future mattered. Kael kept his face still while his squad checked straps, tactical bands, and gloves with the clipped focus of people who had spent years waiting for one day. Beside him, Lyr Avon glanced over with the faintest trace of a grin. You look like you're walking into a funeral. Kael did not look at him. That depends on the exam. A few cadets let out the kind of breath that almost counted as laughter. It loosened the room for a second. Then the briefing wall lit. A three-dimensional sector map rose above the platform. The simulation zone covered stacked corridors, signal hubs, access wells, and mock command nodes built into the Academy's central training block. Kael had drilled on this structure so many times he could almost move through it blind. Then the route markers began updating. They adjusted too quickly. Threat icons shifted before anyone had fully moved, and a route line corrected toward another squad before that squad leader had even finished reading his task packet. The system was not just reacting fast. It looked like it was reacting to decisions before those decisions had fully turned into action. A calm voice rolled down from the observation deck. Cadets, this final exercise will evaluate command continuity, tactical judgment, and mission discipline under unstable field conditions. Follow assigned channels. Deviations will be recorded. Performance will determine command. Eligibility. Commander Sarikdam stood behind the glass with his hands folded behind his back. He was one of the tactical examiners, tall, narrow-faced, and cold in the way some officers became when procedure mattered more to them than people. Kael had seen him supervise advanced drills before. Today, something about him felt different. A drone arm extended a tactical slate to Kael. His assignment appeared in plain terms. Move through the Western Intercept Corridor, block a hostile advance, secure Relay Junction 5, and hold the node until extraction. Simple enough. Hard, but simple. The chamber doors opened. Beyond them waited the sealed tactical block, built to imitate damaged ship interiors and contested station corridors. Guide strips glowed low along the walls. Recycled air moved with a faint metallic chill. The floor vibrated once under Kael's boots as the simulation loaded around them. He turned to his squad. We take the west corridor first. No one breaks line without my call. Lyr, track route drift. Senna, rear watch. We secure the relay, hold it, and leave with everyone. Quick acknowledgements came back. Then they moved in. The first minutes felt like any high-end training run. The tactical display fed Kael route updates. Threat markers shifted through nearby sectors. Doors opened and closed on cue. Somewhere deeper inside the block, muffled pulses of sound suggested simulated weapons fire. But the pattern stayed wrong. Every time Kael slowed, the threat markers slowed. Every time he shifted a cadet to cover a side angle, a pressure indicator appeared near that exact lane within seconds. It did not feel like a system predicting likely decisions. It felt like a system watching real ones and adjusting around them. At a junction, Kael halted the squad and checked the map again. The western route had narrowed by one corridor. Lyr saw it too. That lane wasn't closed on entry. I know. The scenario is adapting too hard. Kael glanced up at the ceiling sensor strip. No warning tone. No visible change. No sign the Academy considered any of this unusual. Stay focused, he said. If this is a stress variant, they want overreaction. We don't give it to them. That was what he told the squad. The truth he kept to himself was less comfortable. He was no longer sure this was still an ordinary stress variant. They reached the first choke point without contact. Ahead lay a short service corridor that opened into Relay Junction 5. The plan was clear. 2 cadets would take the left wall. Kael and LYR would push the threshold. The rest would cover the rear and stabilize the node. Kael started to signal the move. Then his slate flashed. A new instruction appeared at the lower edge of the screen, not in standard scenario blue, but in a pale warning line that looked almost like an internal override. It ordered 1 cadet to reroute through Side Hall 7 for containment support. The line vanished before Kael finished reading it. "Hold," he said. "What is it?" LYR asked. "Unexpected reroute." Before Kael could say more, Doran, who had been covering the rear, stepped half a pace toward the side hall, following the brief path light that had flickered on his own display. The door at Side Hall 7 slammed shut. Not the smooth fade of a simulation barrier. A real hard seal impact. Everyone turned at once. Doran hit the panel from inside. It locked on me. The corridor lights flashed red once, then steadied. Kael crossed the hall in 3 strides and slammed his palm against the manual release plate. Nothing happened. The plate stayed dark. Doran stepped back. Doran did. "My display still says continue route." LYR checked his own wrist screen. "Mine too. It still thinks he's in formation." That changed everything. A simulation glitch might mislabel an icon. It might misread timing. But a real security door had just hard-sealed a cadet in a side corridor, while the exercise continued as if nothing had happened. Kael keyed his local channel. "Command oversight. This is Cadet Varen in Western Corridor. Real lockout at Side Hall 7. I am requesting immediate exam halt and door release." Static answered first. Then Sarikdom's voice came through, calm and flat. "Request denied. Continue the exercise." Kael kept his tone even. A cadet is physically sealed off from his unit. Within acceptable training parameters, Sarek said. "Adapt and proceed." Kael stared through the narrow window strip in the door. Doran stood still inside, breathing evenly, but his eyes had changed. He understood the same thing the others now did. The test was no longer clean. Kael keyed the channel again. "Release the lock. Cadet Varen, your performance is being evaluated in real time. Complete your assignment." The line died. For a second, only, the low thrum of Academy power filled the corridor. Then Senna said, very quietly, "He really wants us to leave him." That was the moment Kael's objective changed. A minute earlier, the goal had been simple. Pass the final exam with no losses and hold command until extraction. Now the exam no longer mattered. The first duty was the oldest one. Get his people out alive. He looked at Doran through the window. Then at the dead manual release. Then at the tactical map, still calmly pushing them forward, as if one of his people had not just been cut off by a real lock. "We are not leaving anyone behind." LYR glanced toward Relay Junction 5. "If we break protocol now, they'll mark you non-compliant." Kael put his slate away. "They can write it down after I get the door open." He pried open the access panel under the wall seam with a field tool. Inside, emergency control ports blinked in cold white rows. He did not need a lecture on the whole system. He needed one thing only. A half-second interruption in local lock priority. "Doran, clear the frame." "Clear." Kael traced the power line, found the override latch, and forced a hard reset through the hall circuit. Sparks jumped. The corridor lights dipped. The sealed door shuddered, stopped, then opened just wide enough for Doran to throw himself through. The moment Doran hit the floor outside, the hall speakers came alive. Unit command deviation recorded. Cadet Kael Varen flagged for directive breach. No one spoke. Kael pulled Doran up, checked him, then helped him reset his stance. The cadet was shaken, but unhurt. LYR exhaled. "So that's official." Kael replaced the panel cover. "Good. That saves them time." Then every wrist display in the squad flashed with a new marker. This one was not tied to the simulation route. It was a Real Academy warning, amber-edged in white. It pulsed 3 times and projected a location deep in another section of the station. Not the tactical block. Not their exam lane. A live systems warning had triggered in the Eastern Residential Training Wing, far beyond the simulation zone. Senna stared at her display. That isn't ours. No, Kael said. The simulation still wanted his squad to continue west. The Academy warning now pointed somewhere else entirely. Both had triggered within seconds of the same command chain. Too precise to be an accident. A colder realization settled into him. Someone was using the exam as cover. He looked at his squad. They were no longer cadets waiting for a supervisor's next instruction. They were people who understood that real risk had entered the academy and the men above the glass had chosen not to stop it. We're done treating this like an exam, Kael said. From here on, we move to keep people alive and find out who's using this simulation to touch the real station. No one argued. They left the western route and slipped into a maintenance spine behind the tactical block. The passage was narrow, its ceiling packed with exposed service lines and low inspection lights. It was not part of the exam route, which was exactly why Kael chose it. He needed a lane the system was less likely to steer. He stopped the squad at a three-way service junction. Listen, we're not following exam objectives anymore. From here on, we do three things. We pull out anyone trapped in these sectors. We find the source of the real orders. And we stay together unless I say otherwise. Doran glanced toward the main passage. What about the other teams? We help the ones we can reach. If we scatter now, this place will split us and lock us down. Senna nodded first. LY a heartbeat later. The others followed because there was nothing left that made more sense. Kael pulled up nearby occupied sectors. The training grid still showed mock hostels and exam routes as if nothing had changed. Under that false picture now blinked real station warnings, flickering in and out like signals forced under bad glass. One cluster mattered immediately. A squad from Eastern Navigation Track was pinned in a sealed coordination room less than 8 minutes away. We go there first, Kael said. Why them? One cadet asked. Because they're trapped and because that room sits near a control branch. If someone is feeding real orders through this sector, that branch may tell us where. They moved quickly through the maintenance spine and emerged above Transit Corridor 9, where clear wall panels overlooked one of the main training decks. From there, Kael got his first clear look at how wide the problem had become. 3 squads still moved under normal exam discipline. One team crouched behind mock cover, waiting for targets that no longer mattered. Another followed route lights into a closed sector without questioning why floor shutters there were half sealed. A third had already split into 2 elements because their instructor channel had told them to flank through separate lanes. Kael swore under his breath. They still think this is controlled. LYR stared through the panel. We tell them. They dropped into the corridor below. The nearest squad leader turned, annoyed before alarm had time to catch up with him. Varen, what are you doing off route? Kill the not slow. This is not a clean simulation. Real doors are locking. Supervisors are refusing exam halt. Pull your people out of split channels and stay off isolated corridors. The other cadet frowned. Command hasn't said any of that. Command is part of the problem. A few cadets in the other squad shifted uneasily, but none moved. The squad leader tapped his earpiece as if waiting for a higher voice to rescue him from having to judge the moment himself. That voice came. All units maintain assigned exam lanes. Disregard unauthorized instructions from Cadet Varen. Directive breach will affect final evaluation. Sarah Dom again. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He simply spoke with the calm of authority, which was far more dangerous. It gave frightened people permission to believe nothing had truly changed. The squad leader straightened. You heard the examiner. Kael stepped closer. If you split your team now, someone's going to get locked in a dead corridor. The cadet hesitated. For a moment, Kael thought the warning had landed. Then the other man looked away first, and Kael knew he had lost him. We move, Kael said to his own people. 2 corridors later, the station proved him right. Behind them, a hard seal alarm snapped through the deck, followed by shouting over open line and then interference. No one in Kael's group spoke after that. They reached the Eastern Coordination Branch through a cargo bypass lit only by emergency strips. The target room sat behind a thick composite door with a recessed control plate and 2 narrow windows. For cadets were trapped inside. One pounded the interior panel with the side of her fist. Another was trying not to panic and failing. Kael stepped to the window, back from the frame. The cadet inside looked up. Varen, the room's sealed on us. Command said, stay in place for simulation stress evaluation. How long ago? For minutes. Maybe 5. Too long. Long enough to make the room a message. Kael, check the wall plate. Real lock indicator. Oxygen stable. Environmental cycle normal. A holding seal, not a kill seal. Whoever was doing this wanted some groups trapped, not dead. Not yet. Can you pop it? Senna asked. Maybe, but not blind. LYR pointed farther down the hall. Control booth. At the end of the branch sat a secondary coordination booth half hidden behind a retractable panel. It monitored the local training sector. It handled timing, environment, and safety locked for rooms like this one. Kael looked from the trapped cadets to the booth and made the decision at once. Senna, Doran, cover the hall. LYR with me. They forced the side panel apart and entered the booth. It was dark except for 2 active consoles and the pale glow of standby data. One chair had been pushed back too fast, as if someone had left in a hurry. Kael slid into the console station and pulled up the local command log. The answer came quickly. The console displayed a line that read, Live Discipline Protocol attached to Exam Sector Grid. Beneath it sat timed permissions, route link triggers, and supervisor override protections stamped with authority markers older than the start of the exam. Loaded before first briefing. LYR saw it with him. That can't be right. It is. Kael scrolled. More lines appeared. Seal permissions. Route denial priorities. Lock protections. It was all there in plain function. The exam grid was not only running the simulation. Someone had attached real control privileges to it before the cadets ever entered the block. This had been planted in advance. The realization hit harder than the locked door had. Not because it surprised him anymore, because it removed the last excuse. This was not a test gone too far. It was a structure, a plan. He copied what he could to his field slate and tried the room seal controls. Standard release was denied. Emergency branch release was denied too. The booth still answered to a higher layer. Then every light in the booth shifted to deep amber. LYR looked up. Movement. The corridor feed showed 2 armed supervision officers advancing through the far junction with shock carbines raised low. Not combat troops. Internal exam enforcement. That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. Because armed supervisors only came to training lanes when the academy wanted obedience more than evaluation. Kael, incoming North Hall, Senna, snapped over local. Hold them for 10 seconds. He could not open the trapped room through formal authority, so he went under it. He overloaded the lock cycle through the maintenance relay beneath the desk. Crude, but crude still worked when official paths had been poisoned. The door down the hall jerked once, then slid open halfway. Move. The trapped cadets shoved through the gap just as the first supervision officer rounded the bend. A warning shout followed. Blue shock fire snapped against the wall near Doran's shoulder and lit the corridor with a hard electric pulse. Fall back to cargo bypass, Kael said. No one froze. That was the only reason they got out. Senna dropped a glare disc into the hall. White light burst across the corridor. Kael grabbed the copied data, shoved LYR toward the exit, and pulled back with the rest into the maintenance cut they had entered from. More boots. More voices. Not random pursuit. A coordinated sweep. They ran through the cargo bypass, descended 1 ladder deck, and sealed a service grate behind them. The lower passage roared with coolant and ventilation flow, loud enough to cover their breathing for a moment. One of the rescued cadets leaned against the wall. What is this? What are they doing? Kael answered plainly. Using the exam to control live sectors. LYR was already checking the copied data. He looked up sharply. Kael. A routing line nested under the branch controls jumped above normal sector authority, then vanished into a blockchain higher in the stack. It was simple enough to read, even without the full map. The local booth had not made the decision. It had only passed the order upward. Someone above Sarek signed this. Kael nodded. That was the first moment the danger, clearly became larger than one examiner. Before he could say more, Senna pointed to a new pulse on her display. This one came from the station AlertNet, not the simulation grid. A power management line had lit up below the academy, down in the planet-facing training district used for civilian emergency drills and reserve instruction. The route trace linked that real district to a simulated command order now spooling through the exam grid. LYR's face tightened. That should be isolated. It should. Kael opened the line trace and understood the danger immediately. A simulation directive was queuing against a real energy balancing system. If it completed, the academy could drain or redirect power through a network serving people who had nothing to do with this exam. One of the rescued cadets swallowed. Can they actually do that? Yes. And if that order goes through, this stops being an academy problem. He tried to push a burst signal toward near-orbit fleet channels. If he could get one clean message out, one real officer outside Aster Gate might freeze the station or at least ask the one question no one inside wanted asked. The signal built. Then it died. The console displayed a line that read, "Outbound relay denied by command layer." Blocked from above. Whoever had signed the planet protocol also had authority over external communication. Kael looked at the group around him. They were tired already, and this had barely begun. Some still wore the expression of people waiting for a real authority to step in and call the whole thing off. No such authority was coming. The people with power were the reason the trap existed. The signal is blocked from upper command, he said. So from this point on, assume 3 things. 1, this was planned before the exam. 2, Sarek is enforcing it. 3, someone above him is keeping the station closed. Doran asked the question no one else wanted to ask. If they can block orbit traffic too, what exactly are they trying to do? Kael thought of the trapped cadets, the armed supervisors, the planted discipline protocol, and the order reaching toward the civilian district below Orinox. They're testing how far they can push live obedience under exam cover. And if we don't stop the next order, they're going to push it past these walls. That changed the air in the passage. Fear remained, but now it had direction. Kael found the next point that mattered. The energy control route was no longer being driven from the local branch they had just escaped. It fed through a higher relay branch on the command side of the academy. To reach it, they would have to cross a transit throat watched by exam oversight, and likely by Sarek himself. Good. At least now he knew where to go. We move for the upper relay branch, he said. If we cut that path, we stop the order-headed planet side. Stay off official routes. Stay together. And if anyone still thinks this is an exam, leave now. No one moved. They climbed through maintenance shafts into upper levels where the walls grew cleaner, quieter, and more controlled. By the time Kael and LYR reached the maintenance lip overlooking the relay approach, command shutters had already sealed off the main access hall. 2 supervision officers, LYR whispered. Maybe 3. They took a narrow cable duct above the left wall, crawled across bundled fiber lines that hummed under their sleeves, and reached the relay room from above. Through the vent slots, Kael saw a compact operations cell centered on a tall relay core. White command lines climbed from the floor in projection ribbons. One chain pulsed brighter than the others. Planet-side power route. Drop on my count, Kael whispered. Hit the left desk first. I go for the relay housing. He kicked the vent free. The panel crashed down onto the console bank. Before the officers in the hall could react, Kael and LYR dropped into the room. Kael hit the floor in a crouch, drove toward the relay core, and slammed his hand onto the emergency isolation handle at its base. Alarms flared instantly. LYR crashed into the left desk and sent one technician operator stumbling backward before she could lock the board. The door blew open. An officer shouted and raised his carbine, but Kael had already torn the relay cover open. He did not need to destroy the branch. He only needed to interrupt the active path long enough to break the live order and force the system to recalculate. He ripped a coolant shunt free and jammed it across the relay junction. The relay flashed white, then cut to black for one hard second. Every projected command chain above it vanished. At the same time, Senna's voice came back over local, breathless and urgent. Chamber 12, just unlocked. We got them. Repeat, we got them. Kael allowed himself half a breath of relief. Then the projection ribbon returned. Not all the lines. Just one. A new command path rose from deeper inside the academy. Not from the upper relay branch he had just crippled, but from somewhere below the training architecture entirely. It bypassed the upper relay and snapped into a lower protected channel. LYR saw it at the same moment. No, Kael understood at once. They had hit what looked like the center, but only because the real control had already been moved. Sarek had let them bleed time up here, while authority shifted downward into the deep simulation core. Sarek's voice came through the room's speakers, as if he had been waiting for Kael to realize it. Cadet Varen, that was a strong decision under pressure. Misguided, but strong. You moved authority. Authority was always where it needed to be. The officer at the door had recovered by then. Two more arrived behind him. LYR drove one into the wall rail. Kael kicked the loose relay cover into another man's legs. Exit, LYR shouted. Kael, check the room map. Rear floor. Go. They ran. They were not running toward another secret. They were just getting clear before the room sealed around them. Kael snatched a portable memory block off the damaged desk on instinct, then dropped through a maintenance hatch with LYR right behind him. They slid into a half-lit conduit tunnel while boots hammered overhead and command alarms rolled across the level. By the time the tunnel ended in a narrow service vault below the relay room, Kael was already opening the block because it was the first safe second they had. What did you get? LYR asked. Don't know yet. The block fought the first security prompt, then opened just enough to spill out index fragments. Route permissions, behavioral evaluations, command retention ratings. Most of it was sealed. One file stood out because someone had left it in quick access cache. LYR, turn from the hatch. We have maybe a minute. Kael opened the file. At first it read like a standard doctrine review. Then the language sharpened. Candidate selection under live moral compression. Command viability under unlawful directive pressure. Retention priority for compliant officers. He scrolled again and saw the heart of it. The final examination had been designed as a filter. It was not built to find the best future commanders. It was built to find the cadets who would keep following orders even when those orders were wrong. Cadets who resisted illegal or reckless directives were categorized as unstable, compromised, or unsuitable. Cadets who obeyed and preserved command structure, even at human cost, were marked as viable. If necessary, their removal could be buried under accident language, generated by training environments. LYR read over his shoulder and went still. They built this into the exam. Kael kept scrolling. Case bands. Projection scenarios. Risk allowances. Not detailed body counts. Something colder than that. The system did not need to plan every outcome. It only needed enough pressure and enough cover to reveal who would obey without judgment. The exam was never about graduation. It was about obedience. Senna's voice burst across local. We pulled 6 out of Chamber 12. 1 injured, but moving. We're heading for lower transit throat. Kael, answer at once. Good. Stay off central lanes. Deep core controls are active. There was a pause. The file was still open in his hand, the truth still new in his mind, and he had barely had time to absorb it. Then another voice came through, calm and familiar. Already too late for that. Kael froze. Cadet Marotane. Maro was a senior command cadet from another section, older than most, steady enough that Kael had always read him as one of the few competent neutrals in the class. Now he sounded composed in a way that turned Kael cold. Maro, where are you? With the people who still understand what this academy is trying to build. LYR swore under his breath. Kael forced his voice flat. You sold route positions. I protected command structure. Senna cut in, furious. You let us into the lower throat. Maro ignored her. You think this is corruption because you still believe command is about conscience first. It isn't. Not anymore. They gave us pressure, and half the class cracked into improvisation and moral theater. The other half obeyed chain and finished objectives. Which half do you think the fleet actually needs? Kael did not waste time on disgust. What did you do? I gave upper command the names of cadets most likely to resist. Then I helped route survivors into controlled sectors. Senna's voice sharpened. There are injured people with us. I know. That is why you should put down your tools and accept containment before someone makes this harder. Kael kept the channel open because information mattered more than anger. Where are you holding them? Morrow paused. Then he made the mistake. Lower transit throat. Gate ring 2. Kael needed no more than that. But Morrow added one more blow. We also recovered one more cadet from the chamber. Zone. LYR's sister found your people before we did. She's with us now. LYR's face drained. Turin Avon Reserve Operations Track. Not close to LYR, but blood was blood, and Morrow knew exactly what that meant. Bring me the copied file, Kael, Morrow said. Do that, and the captives stay safe. Keep the file, and I hand them back to command as unstable elements under live resistance. The channel closed. For a second, the service vault seemed too small to hold air. LYR looked at Kael, panic contained only by force. He doesn't get to use her. Kael checked the two slates. One held the doctrine file. The other held route logs and proof of preloaded live protocols. Not enough to expose the whole structure if one vanished. Too much to throw away. We go now, LYR said. If we go blind, we may give them the file and the rest of the group. If we don't go, they keep her. That was true. It was also exactly what Morrow wanted. Not just pressure, but division. Strip Kael of the wider problem by forcing him into the most immediate human wound. It almost worked. Kael looked at the map, the slates, and the sealed hatch above them, where Sarek's people still searched the relay branch. He had proof in his hand and hostages in enemy control. He had barely finished understanding one truth when the next crisis hit on top of it. Someone important had been taken. The evidence existed, but not safely. And for the first time since the exam began, whatever he chose first would seem to cost him the other thing. He drew one slow breath. Then he chose movement over paralysis. He and LYR pulled back into an old maintenance sector buried behind the Academy's power circulation layer. There, one by one, the surviving cadets rejoined them through side cuts and ladder wells until the cramped room held the last people Kael could still account for. Senna came in first with the rescued cadets from Chamber 12. One had a stiff leg. Two others carried smoke marks from a bad panel breach. No one looked untouched anymore. The room smelled of metal dust, sweat, and overheated wiring. People were breathing hard, leaning on walls, and trying not to look at the empty spaces where others should have been. Kael counted silently. Himself, LYR, Senna, Doran, the 4 cadets from the Eastern Branch, the 6 from Chamber 12, minus the ones intercepted near the lower transit throat. 12 left in the room, including 1 injured and 1 barely holding panic down. Morrow had sided with upper command. A captive group was being held near Gate Ring 2. Turn was with them, and somewhere above all of it, Sarek Dom was still steering the Academy while someone higher ran the real test from the deep core. Kael projected the Academy map onto the service wall. The light shook slightly because his hand was not as steady as he wanted it to be. Listen carefully. This is where we stand. The room quieted, but not cleanly. It was the quiet of tired people forcing themselves to stay present. Everyone in this room is who we still have with us. The others are alive, but Morrow has them near Gate Ring 2. He marked a dark section behind the main administrative block. Sarek still controls the local sweep teams, and the deeper command is running from here now. If we leave that core alone, they get one more clean move. One of the rescued cadets asked the obvious question. What kind of move? One that turns this from something hidden into something no one can contain. Kael looked around the room. He saw fear, anger, and the dull strain of people who had already used too much energy and knew they still were not done. Our choices are bad, he said. So we stop acting like trapped cadets and start acting like the only group left in this station that sees what this really is. LYR leaned against the wall. Say it plainly. The people above us still need this to look controlled. No one interrupted him. If they wanted open slaughter, they would not hide behind exam language and discipline notices. They're still hiding inside procedure because they need a story the fleet can accept for a little longer. Senna understood first. So we make them lose that story. Kael nodded. Yes, that was the turn. Until now, they had been trying to survive inside the trap. From this point on, Kael would force the trap to expose the people who built it. He pulled the doctrine file back onto the wall and highlighted the command signatures buried inside the chain. One office marker mattered more than the rest. War adaptation and command philosophy. Not just Sarek. Not just one cruel examiner with too much power. A doctrine arm buried inside the Academy's command structure. This is what they still need from us, Kael said. They need us scared, split up, and moving through routes they control. They need the captives quiet. They need the evidence trapped. And they need the deep core left alone long enough to fire the next order cleanly. He marked 3 routes on the map. So this is what we do. He pointed to the first route. Group 1 makes noise where command cannot ignore it. Not random noise. Visible disruption near central admin. So they have to send people where others can see them. His finger moved to the second route. Group 2 goes for the captives at the lower transit throat. Your job is not to hold the sector. Your job is to open the gate, get people moving, and bring them out. Then the third route. Group 3 is me and one other. We go into the deep simulation core through service access behind the operations wing. We either force that core open to outside eyes, or we shut it down before the next live order launches. LYR folded his arms. You already know who you're taking. Yes. Senna pointed toward the map. If I take the decoy group, who goes for the hostages? Kael looked at Doran. You do. Doran blinked. Me? You're steady in tight corridors. You know the lower transit routes. And Morrow still thinks you're someone he can overlook. Fear crossed Doran's face. So did resolve. Kael assigned to rest quickly. Senna would take 3 cadets with glare discs and field tools to trigger route failures near the admin spine. Doran would take 4 to free the hostages. Kael and LYR would move alone toward the deep core because fewer bodies meant fewer sensor flags. He handed 1 copy of the doctrine file to Senna and kept the other. If one team gets cut off, the truth still moves. Then he looked at them all one last time. Remember the real purpose of your run. Senna, you're not trying to defeat them. You're trying to make them react in the open. Doran, you are not chasing Morrow. You are bringing living people out. LYR and I are not hunting answers. We are going for the source. He opened the hatch. The split happened fast. Senna's group broke west through service galleries that emptied near the admin spine. Doran and his rescue team dropped down a freight shaft toward the lower transit throat. Kael and LYR climbed into the command side of the academy, where the walls grew smoother, the air quieter, and every surface seemed built to reassure authority that it would never be challenged. The deep core access sat behind operations archive, blocked by a black security door with no visible latch. Training sectors did not hide like this. Doctrine did. No manual plate, LYR said. Kael held the doctrine file slate toward the sensor eye above the door. The status strip lit for 1 second. The console displayed a line that read, Restricted Doctrinal Review Path Acknowledged. That shouldn't work, LYR murmured. It doesn't need to open. It only needs to confirm we're in the right place. Kael pried a decorative wall cap loose and exposed the narrow maintenance loop hidden behind it. He bridged the contact with a field tool. The black door twitched, then opened just wide enough for 2 people to slip through. They entered and sealed it behind them just before voices reached the hall outside. A narrow descending ramp wrapped around a cylindrical shaft. At the bottom, behind a glass divider, the deep simulation core glowed in pale white rings like a buried engine. Processing towers circled a central command dais. Above it, projection lines rose into the academy grid. And standing on that dais, waiting, was Director Maelys Run. She did not turn immediately. She let them see the room first. When she finally faced them, her expression held no surprise. Cadet Varen, you took longer than I expected. LYR stepped half a pace forward. Kael stopped him with an arm. You're running the doctrine test, Kael said. Maelys gave the faintest nod. I approved it. You're using live command pressure on cadets. I am identifying future officers under conditions closer to war than comfort. Her tone was calm, almost clinical. Sarek enforced the machine. Maylis had designed the belief behind it. You're calling this training? Elwire said. No, I am calling it selection. That word chilled the room more than anger would have. Kael looked past her to the bright command lines over the core. One line pulsed stronger than the rest. A countdown. Strip beside it had already begun. What's the next order? Maylis did not evade. A live redirection through the civilian training district. Elwire stared. You would actually do it? I would create an event no internal reviewer could dismiss as a simple fault. Once chain command is forced to respond, the cadets who maintain discipline under impossible pressure will be obvious. The rest were never fit for command. Kael saw then that Maylis was not hiding behind Sarek's logic of exam continuity. Sarek protected the test. Maylis believed in it. You needed to look like escalation under pressure, Kael said. Not like planned murder. For the first time, a slight change touched her expression. Words like that are why you were always going to fail this filter. You still imagine command is moral first and effective second. War does not reward that. And yet you're still hiding this from the fleet. That landed. The fleet rewards results, she said. It does not reward weakness in officer training. No, it also does not reward public purges inside a command academy. Before she could answer, Senna's voice burst across local. Central admin is lit up. They pulled almost every supervisor team our way. A second later, Doran came through breathless. We reached gate ring 2. We have visual on the captives. Morrow is here. Maylis heard enough from the open line to understand the shape of it. You divided your people. I gave you too many fires to hide. Her eyes narrowed. The countdown strip shifted from pale white to deep amber. Only minutes remained. Outside the black door above, alarms began to rise. Boots moved fast in converging waves. The final clock had started. Then the black door burst inward. Commander Sarek Dom entered first with 2 supervision officers behind him. His uniform was still sharp. His face was still controlled. Chaos had touched everyone else inside the academy. It had barely touched him. Cadet Varen. Step away from the core. Kael did not move. Sarek's gaze flicked once to Maylis, and that one glance told Kael everything. He was not surprised by what Maylis had admitted. He had always known. He was not the architect. He was the enforcer who kept the architecture orderly. Your containment measures failed, Kael said. They slowed you long enough. That was honest, at least. Sarek started down the ramp, one step at a time, forcing Kael to choose between the man in front of him and the command lines behind him. That was the point. Hold Kael in the personal fight while the larger order completed. Kael knew it. Sarek knew he knew it. Still, the fight came. Sarek drew a compact shock baton and flicked it alive with a pale blue arc. Not lethal, not theatrical, just the Academy's preferred tool for forcing people back into line. You still have a way out, Sarek said. Drop the slate. Stand down. The fleet will hear the approved report when this is over. Kael took his own baton, but did not activate it yet. That is exactly why I won't. Sarek moved first. Fussed. Hard. Controlled. Kael barely got his arm up in time to absorb the first strike on the baton housing. The impact drove him sideways into the inner rail. Sarek pressed immediately, not trying to win cleanly, but trying to herd him backward along the ramp, step by step, and away from the core controls. LYR tried to cut in, but one supervision officer stepped down fast enough to intercept him. The second officer held the upper angle and blocked any path back toward the door. The room split into 2 fights. Kael gave ground for 2 steps, then stopped doing what Sarek wanted. Instead of staying near the center of the ramp, he edged toward the outer rail where the floor curved over the core pit. He activated his baton only when Sarek committed to a second drive. Blue light snapped between them as Kael turned the hit and redirected it toward the rail post. Sarek recovered quickly and struck low, then high, then low again. Efficient pressure. No wasted movement. No merci. Kael read the pattern and saw the one thing that mattered. Sarek kept circling around one short section of ramp near the outer rail support where a maintenance seam crossed the floor. Because he knew it was weak. Kael took one more backward step and made it look clumsy. Sarek followed, pressing hard, exactly as Kael wanted. It placed Sarek's lead foot over the unstable seam. Kael pivoted around the rail support and brought his baton down, not into Sarek's arm, but into the exposed maintenance latch built into the floor line. Sparks burst. The latch blew open. A narrow panel under Sarek's lead foot dropped half. A handspan. Sarek stumbled. Half a step was enough. Kael drove forward with his shoulder, slammed Sarek into the outer rail, and twisted the shock baton out of his grip. Sarek caught Kael by the sleeve and nearly dragged him down with him, but Kael used the rail post for leverage and forced him sideways across the weak panel. The panel gave again. Sarek crashed to one knee. Kael stripped the active baton from his hand and snapped the charge hard against the metal rail beside Sarek's head. Light flared. Sarek jerked back and lost balance fully, hitting the ramp flat. LYR broke through his own fight at the same time by driving one officer into the rail and pinning the other's weapon arm against the wall. The second officer lost his carbine over the steps. Sarek tried to rise. Kael hit the emergency restraint stud on the rail beside him. A short field clamp snapped out and locked across Sarek's forearm and shoulder, pinning him to the seam he had tried so hard not to step on. Sarek was still conscious, still furious beneath the calm, but no longer in command of the fight. Kael looked down at him. You built a whole career around making people obey the wrong thing. Sarek forced himself up on one elbow. I built a career around preparing officers for war. No. You built one around protecting people like her. Kael turned from him and faced Maelys. Sarek had been the wall. Maelys was the reason the wall existed. The countdown above the core had nearly reached its end. Maelys stood with both hands on the command rail, still calm enough to be dangerous. You beat the wrong person, she said. I know. She looked at the slate in Kael's hand. You can still save the people below if you stop trying to expose me. Drop the file into the core purge lane, and I will release the hostages. LYR stepped forward. Don't listen to her. Kael did not answer either of them. He was listening to the room. The core gave off a deep, steady hum. The planet-facing command line pulsed in amber above Maelys's shoulder. On the far side of the dais, a narrow transmission arch fed outward toward the Academy's sealed fleet relay system. Dark for now, locked under upper authority. That was the second half of Maelys's trap. She lifted one hand and pointed. That arch is the only path from this room to the fleet outside orbit. The hostage locks answer through that same control lane. Open one, and I shut the other. You save your truth, or you save your people. Pick one. Doran's voice came across local, thin under interference. Kael, we hear movement on the other side of the gate. They may relocate the captives. Maelys gave a faint nod toward the amber line. Nor do you have long for that. There it was. Her real lesson. Force the future officer to abandon one good thing for another and call the choice strength. Kael took one slow breath and looked again at the room, not as a prisoner of her frame, but as a tactician inside a machine. She had told him the truth without meaning to. The hostage locks and the fleet transmission arch were both tied into the same lower control path under the main console. Maelys thought that made the choice simple, because the system was built to open one channel at a time and deny the other. Kael looked down at the lower console ring beneath the dais and saw the weakness at once. The whole thing was too rigid. It knew how to obey one clean command, not two urgent ones crashing through together. Maelys misread his silence as hesitation. War has always demanded that somebody be left behind, Cadet Varen. The only question is whether you're mature enough to choose who. Kael finally spoke. No. The question is whether people like you build a system too rigid to survive being forced to do two right things at once. Before she could parse that, he moved. He threw the duplicate doctrine slate to LYR, transmission arch. When I say, then he vaulted the inner rail. Maelys stepped back in genuine surprise for the first time. Kael did not land on the main dais. He dropped onto the narrow maintenance ring below it, the one used to service the lower control channels feeding both hostage containment and external transmission. One bad step, and he would have fallen into the core pit. But he did not need the high command console. He needed the overlooked layer underneath it. Maelys lunged toward the main rail controls, trying to hardlock the lower ring. But Kael was already under the dais where the two commands split before being handed upward. One branch held the hostage gates. The other carried the transmission burst. He did not need the full technical model. He only needed both paths forced open at the same moment. If the system tried to obey both, it would jam itself. Above him, Melee struck the main lock panel. The console displayed a line that read Priority Conflict Detected. Good. Kael jammed Sarek's fallen shock baton into the lower service split and bridged the paired controls manually. The baton flared hot against his hand. The lower ring lights flashed, died, then returned in sharp white. He shouted upward. LYR. Now. LYR moved instantly. He slammed the doctrine file into the transmission arch and hit bursts in the moment the lower bridge came alive. At the same instant, Kael keyed Doran. Gate now. Move. The room exploded into overlapping alarms. The shared control path jammed exactly where Kael needed it to. For one brief stretch, the system stopped choosing, and that was enough. The transmission arch flared in a column of pale light. Doctrine files, command signatures, live discipline protocols, route logs, and control histories surged outward before Melees could shut the path again. At the same time, Doran shouted over local. The gate opened. We have them. We have them. LYR's voice followed at once. Transmission is out. Repeat, it's out. Melees hit the control rail so hard the panel cracked. The amber line, aimed at the civilian district, stuttered. Kael looked up through the maintenance grating and saw why. The control path was still stuck fighting itself. It had opened the gate, carried the burst, and choked before it could finish the last command. That was the break. He hauled himself back up onto the dais and went straight for the main command line. Melees turned toward him, anger finally cutting through her calm. You fool. You have no idea what you've destabilized. I know exactly enough. He drove the still-hot baton into the base of the final command rail. The amber line above them shattered into static. Across the room, every command projection flickered, then dropped. The live order to the civilian district died before completion. For one strange second, the deep core went almost silent. Then the academy changed. A deep carrier tone rolled through the structure above, lower and heavier than any training alarm. It was the sound of external authority taking hold of internal systems. A second later, every light in the deep core shifted from Academy white to fleet blue. LYR looked up sharply. They got it. The transmission arch flared again and then locked open under outside handshake. Fleet Command had received the burst. More important, it had answered. Across the Academy, route locks began releasing in controlled waves. The ceiling speakers hissed. Then a voice came through that was neither Sarek's nor Melees's. It was an orbital fleet controller, clipped and official. Aster Gate Command Academy is under immediate external review. All internal authority transfers are suspended. All armed supervisors stand down. This station is now under fleet containment. Melee's run went still. Not broken. Not dramatic. But for the first time, she looked like someone standing inside a theory that had failed to survive contact with reality. Sarek, pinned higher on the ramp, closed his eyes once. That small motion told Kael everything. He knew it was over. Doran came through local with relief and exhaustion tangled together. We got the captives clear. Morrow ran for upper lane, but he's cut off. Turn is with us. Repeat, Turn is with us. LYR sat down hard against the rail for one breath, more from release strain than injury. He laughed once, a short, disbelieving sound, then got back to his feet. Below the command dais, the lower maintenance bridge Kael had forced burned out in a shower of harmless sparks. The Academy's hidden machine had not just been interrupted. It had been exposed in the exact way Melees feared most. Not as rumor, not as accusation, as evidence tied to live station behavior and external oversight. Fleet Marines reached the deep core minutes later. They entered in sealed teams through the black door above the ramp and through the secondary access behind the dais. They moved with the calm speed of people used to taking control of compromised structures. No one fired. No one needed to. The Academy's authority had already collapsed. Sarek was released from the field clamp, only to be placed under fleet restraint. Maelys did not resist when the Marines approached her. She simply looked at Kael one last time. You saved your people today. One day you will understand what that costs in war. Kael answered without heat. If war requires this, then what failed was not the cadets. She said. Nothing after that. When the deep core was secured, Kael and LYR were escorted to an observation gallery while investigators sealed the room and spread through the academy. Below them, Orinox turned in slow red silence as if nothing inside Aster Gate had changed. But everything had. Senna sat with the Chamber 12 survivors while medics checked the injured cadet's leg and finally allowed everyone to breathe without listening for the next lock alarm. Doran, who had doubted himself at every major turn, turned out to be exactly steady enough to bring people home when it mattered. Turin Avon sat wrapped in a thermal blanket near the gallery wall. LYR crossed to her without saying a word. They stood face to face for one small second, then embraced hard and briefly, like siblings who had learned too much in too little time. As for Kael, fleet investigators asked for statements, route descriptions, and timing confirmations until his voice went rough from repetition. He gave them what they needed. When it was over, he stepped alone to the glass overlooking Orinox. Storm bands moved slowly over the desert world below. Civilian lights glimmered faintly near the training district that had almost been dragged into someone else's doctrine. From orbit, none of the damage inside Aster Gate was visible. Then LYR joined him at the rail. They're saying the command track will be suspended until review is complete. Kael nodded. They're also saying your file is a mess now. Directive breaches, unauthorized route manipulation, live core interference. LYR let out a tired half-laugh. So congratulations. You may be impossible to graduate. Kael kept his eyes on the planet. That would be cleaner than what they planned. LYR gave a soft laugh and leaned on the rail beside him. For a while, neither of them spoke. After everything, the quiet felt strange. Finally, LYR asked, Do you still want the fleet after this? Kael took longer than he expected to answer. Yes, but not the version that was hiding in there. That was the truth he could live with. The investigation that followed would reach far beyond Aster Gate. The War Doctrine Office would not survive what the files showed. Commander Sarek Dom would stand trial as the chief enforcer of the live discipline program. Director Maelys Run would face charges no internal board could bury. The final exam that had begun, as a trap ended as evidence. The cadets who lived through it would carry something harder than a ruined test score into whatever came next. They had seen how easily an institution could hide fear inside the language of strength and call surrender to authority maturity. They had also seen that refusal, if timed well and carried far enough, could break a machine built to sort human beings into obedience. Below them, the red curve of Orinox caught a line of morning light. Kael watched it in silence and knew the academy he had entered that day was gone for good. That loss did not feel simple, but it felt clean. Far above the planet, beyond the academy ring and the fleet blockade, a small transport without clear academy markings drifted at the edge of monitored space for less than a minute before vanishing into the outer lanes. No alert followed it yet. No one on the gallery could see it with the naked eye. But when the next story began, it would begin there. Even after the alarms fell silent, Aster Gate never felt the same again. The corridors still stood. The lights still burned. The academy still hung above the red world of Orinox like it had on every day before. But something inside it had been broken open, and no report, no hearing, and no new chain of command would ever seal it back the way it was. Kael Varen had entered the final exam, believing he was there to prove he deserved command. He walked out understanding something heavier. Command was not obedience without thought. It was knowing when a line should never be crossed, even when power demanded it, and even when fear made silence feel easier. Some of the people who survived that day would carry scars no one could see. Some would never trust institutions the same way again. Far below, Orinox kept turning beneath the stars. Far above, the fleet kept watch. And somewhere in the cold distance beyond the academy, the future was already moving toward them, quiet, patient, and not yet finished. If this story stayed with you, if it made you think, or if you want more science fiction stories where courage, sacrifice, and humanity are tested among the stars, please like the video, share it with someone who loves great sci-fi, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps this journey continue. And if you do subscribe, you won't just be following a channel. You'll be stepping into the next story with us.